Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and in this video, I want to discuss a few major story beats that Final Fantasy XIV is setting up as our follow-up to the Hydaelyn and Zodiark story arc. Spoilers if you have not played patch 6.1, as we'll be covering major details from the MSQ. Alright, so patch 6.1 holds the burden of acting as a new beginning for our Final Fantasy XIV adventures, with the Warrior of Light just returning to their status as a simple adventurer. It's not long, however, before the threads of fate begin unraveling, and we already find ourselves facing a potential threat as grave as the final days itself. At the start of 6.1, we ponder on Emmett's teases of adventure to come and settle on exploring the ruins beneath the bounty. While we search for answers for this in Radzat Han, Estinian actually procures a map detailing the location of these selfsame secrets. After recruiting a few more scions to investigate the ruins and the rumors around the hidden treasure, we venture deep into the ruins to discover the lost treasures of Alzadal III. At the bottom, we find a large alchemical fixture tightly sealed, before Vreecher appears as Varshan and warns us against unsealing it. He reveals that this fixture is used to seal away a functioning gate to the void, which we know as the 13th Shard, lost 10,000 years ago to darkness when the Ascians failed their first attempt at a rejoining. In explaining why he would hide such a secret, Vreecher reveals that in the war against Allag, he and his elder sister Esdaya, the remaining 7th sibling of the First Brood that we haven't met, flew to Marasidia to answer Tiamat's roar. With Xande commanding legions of Voidsent, Esdaya flew directly into a void gate to attack the army at its core, before it closed behind her. In his desperate attempt to save her, Vreecher uncovered and attempted to expand a portal with the help of Thavnair's brightest alchemists. However, the journey was deemed too risky after just a brief expansion, and thus has been sealed away ever since, about 5,000 years now. The remainder of the patch finds us investigating the portal in many ways. Y'shtola wants to use it to discover how to travel between the shards so she can fulfill her promise to Runar. We, however, alongside Estinian, wholly commit to developing a means to explore the 13th using enhanced versions of the very wards we use to stave off tempering when dealing with Fandaniel's tower. By the end of the patch, Vreecher is emboldened by his people to seek closure on the fate of Esdaya, while work on the enhanced wards is started so that Y'shtola, Estinian, and the Warrior of Light may plunge right into the void itself. Now, this alone sets up some pretty good guesses about where we might go, mostly stuff involving the 13th. There's actually been a lot of side quests and stories revolving around the 13th for the past couple of expansions, but they've always just kind of been left behind after we've initially discovered them. This is starting to bring all the threads together, things like Unukalhai, things like Silva, things like the actual Shadowbringers role quest that we experience, as well as these new events that are taking place. But it's not even where it really ends. I mean, we could end up in Marasidia with Vreetra. Maybe there's a bigger gate that's there left over from when Esdaya actually flew in during the war. And Y'shtola, of course, is trying to get to the first, which then opens up all the other shards as a possibility if she can master this magic. That being said, there are really two major story teasers that I want to discuss that are from this patch. The first actually occurs early on, as the Warrior of Light falls asleep while Tataru very slowly works on her new adventuring garments. During our nap, we see a being of darkness returning to what, at the time, appears to be the 13th. We do get an extended scene of this later, which does confirm that it is indeed the 13th Shard, and reveals that what we're seeing is none other than the same Voidsent that Xenos created a pact with when he became a Reaper. Now, this is a pretty important lingering thread because Yoshida told us to pay careful attention to the Voidsent that Xenos has actually made a pact with, but nothing ever really came of that, so we're like, am I supposed to recognize that? Well, I guess no, we're supposed to learn about it later. That was just his clever way of saying that we should pay attention. Now, some theorize that Voidsent we create a pact with as a Reaper, they're actually a piece of our completed soul, shattered when Hydaelyn curb stomped Zodiark, and then corrupted by the failed rejoining, so that could very well be a piece of Xenos' soul, at least if the theory is true. Others simply believe it's no different than a traditional pact, but that the Voidsent somehow resonates with our soul through other means, perhaps a semblance of who they were before the 13th actually corrupted them. Now, no matter what you believe, the Voidsent that shared a pact with Xenos is no small matter. Now, the first fears, of course, is, does it actually contain his soul, his intent, maybe even his consciousness? I don't think it'll go that far, but it's a very real thing to leave on the table. Now, even if that isn't the case, any void scent that resonated and formed a pact with Xenos is pretty likely to share in the same bloodlust and desire for combat, and its desire to return to the source could open up a much larger path and a more dangerous one than the one Vritra is trying to keep closed. That's why I think there could be another void gate on Marasidia's continent and not just the one that Vritra is hiding. This is likely to be among the more major points going forward, so we'll be expecting scenes that expand upon this patch to patch. Now, the other scene worth discussing also takes place on the 13th, and it actually has a bit more we can speculate on just because we have some knowledge from previous Final Fantasy games to make some guesses with. We'll get to that in a second. This scene shows a knight clad in black armor arriving upon a throne. He's then joined by 4 different idols, each of them resting upon an elemental throne. They take notice of the void gate that Vritra temporarily allowed to open and just dismiss it. It's not big enough, it's not a concern to them. However, they're actually making plans for a war that will earn them redemption for their star. They speak of the Warrior of Light and the defeat of the Cloud of Darkness while assuring us that their plan is about to be set in motion. Now, for those unfamiliar with the classic Final Fantasy games, we know exactly who all 5 of these individuals are. The Black Knight is none other than Golbez, one of the major antagonists of Final Fantasy IV. The 4 elemental thrones represent the 4 elemental archfiends of that game. Scarmiglione as the Fiend of Earth, Cagnazzo as the Fiend of Water, Barbarisha as the Fiend of Wind, and Rubicante as the Fiend of Fire. Now, in Final Fantasy IV, all 5 of them were in service to a being known as Zemus, a Lunarian who sought to dominate the planet, seeing his race as superior. He placed the 4 elemental fiends in service of Golbez, whom he then mind-controlled to do his dirty work. With their combined efforts, Golbez managed to collect all 8 of the planet's crystals to bring the Giant of Babel to the planet, with the intent of eliminating all life. When this fails and Golbez is actually freed from Zemus's mind control, he and his allies track him down on the moon and defeat Zemus. This only causes his hatred to manifest in a new form though, Zeramis, who's only defeated when Cecil uses a crystal to make his form corporeal before slaying him. Zeramis then states that so long as evil lives on in people's hearts, he will never die. So we really have to wonder how much of Golbez and the 4 elemental archfiends story will be translated into Final Fantasy XIV. We also have to guess if it's going to be MSQ going forward, or if this is going to branch off into a side series. I did predict that the 4 elemental fiends would actually be our trial series for 0.2 until 7.0. Now, given the development team's history, I bet there's a ton of relevant details about Golbez, the fiends, and how we're going to be interacting with them. For one, I actually want to focus on Zemus. Now, Zemus is a Lunarian, and that's actually quite interesting. Floating above the world of darkness, we actually see a large orb of darkness in the sky, long believed to be that world's moon. Yoshida recently mentioned that every shard does have its own moon, which makes sense, you'd assume a piece of Zodiark would be in each of them, and that those moons are indeed relevant to the individual shards. He made special note of this. Now, this kind of comment just gets my brain shifting gears constantly, thinking of all the possible permutations and outcomes that could result from a comment like this. You know, Golbez and the Fiends are busy discussing an opportunity of great import that, after 10,000 years, basically when their rejoining failed, will allow them to earn redemption for their star. I find it interesting that this is occurring just after we've defeated Zodiark and averted the final days. I also noticed that the dark moon we normally see in cutscenes in the world of darkness apparently looks like it's faded a little bit in these scenes. Now, if only I could take the time to actually tell you all the ways my brain is going with this. I mean, one way is that Zemus might actually have been a portion of Zodiark's essence trapped in the moon, and unleashing him caused the flood in the first place. Obviously, that's not all there was to the flood. We know some of the finer details thanks to Unakahai and Silva, but this could have been a catalyst for it. In that case, defeating Zodiark might destroy Zemus as well, which would release Golbez and the Fiends from his control. They might then seek redemption for the star, but their intents may not necessarily be ones that align with ours. It's also possible Zemus had been patiently awaiting Zodiark's defeat so that he might extend his influence, and now is controlling Golbez and the Fiends. Unless Zemus sees the 13th resident as superior though, I'm not sure what kind of redemption he might seek. He is more of a being of pure hatred, hence why when he is defeated, he becomes Zeramis in the first place. It's also possible that the Dark Ether of the 13th is actually the non-corporeal form of Zeramis himself and the source that taints all the energy it touches. Thus, if we're going to go deal with the 13th, we're dealing with Zeramis pretty much all the time. Now, we definitely need to ponder on that. I think a lot of us who played Final Fantasy IV are going to be thinking about this pretty much every single time we think of the MSQ. But I did make a kind of sadder realization while I was watching the scene back later. I watched the first time, I was just like, oh my god, it's Golbez, oh my god, it's the Elemental Archfiends. And while I understood what was happening in the rest of the MSQ, I could recite it to you, I didn't really put the pieces together about the scenes that were presented. We're presented with Golbez right after Vritra was talking about Azdaia being lost to the void for 5,000 years. Now, Golbez himself in Final Fantasy IV is a powerful sorcerer, and at his beck and call is a shadow dragon. It's completely loyal to him, and in several iterations of him across various media, mostly the Dissidia franchise, it's a close ally and weapon that he utilizes. Well, Golbez, Shadow Dragon, I think you see where I'm going with this. It's not unreasonable to assume that Azdaia's fate might actually already be written in shadow, with Golbez's Shadow Dragon being none other than Vritra's elder sister. I suspect that we'll probably get confirmation of this within this expansion, but how it shapes Vritra's character going forward is likely to be a major development for him. I'll be very shocked if it doesn't take this direction, but there has to be some sort of conclusion. We can't just go there and not find Azdaia and then be like, yeah, we tried at least. There's got to be some sort of tragic turn or happy outcome, and maybe we could free Azdaia somehow. We've done crazy things up to this point, but I just think we're going to have to put Big Girl down. Now, honestly, I could ramble on about this MSQ for quite some time. Like I said, there are a lot of implications for something that is a brand new adventure, but as we say in the MSQ itself, I guess so much for taking a break, because they immediately pumped the gas. It's pretty impressive, because I think we all thought there'd be a little more, I guess, tedium, a little bit more of the slow adventuring life, and instead we're immediately jumping into this void-driven story. I do wonder if they'll try to tie in the role quest, Unocal High Silva, any of that stuff. I don't think they can make it mandatory. I don't think they'd make that role quest mandatory, but I mean, I have to think about it at the very least. There is also Gaia, who said they would try to find a way to actually hop between the stars, visit the source. Ishtola's trying to do it. Gaia's trying to do it. Everyone's just trying to learn how to hop shards at this point. So, I mean, I have to assume all those barriers are going to be broken down within an expansion or two at this point. Anyway, regardless of that, I just wanted to make this video. Let me end the video before I ramble on anymore. Thank you for watching. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share. And I will see you in the next video. Until then, take care.